I'm Imelda Cajipe Endaya, visual artist doing mixed media paintings, prints, and installations. In today's episode of Cultural Cash Online, I will be talking about my work at the Cultural Center of the Philippines 21st Century Art Museum collection entitled Mansanas sa Almusal. I first exhibited this work at my solo exhibition held at the 4th floor hallway at the Cultural Center of the Philippines in 1988. I have not exhibited this outside the CCP because I donated this work to the institution in exchange for my travel assistance for my participation in the Creación Femenina 1987, Second Congress of Women Artists in the Hispanic World at the University of Puerto Rico. During the Marcos dictatorship between 1972 and 1986, there was an import liberalization policy that lowered the tariffs for imports such as apples, which meant this became cheaper to buy than locally grown fruits. And there was hardly any support for farmers, and food continued to be so expensive that the poor had hardly anything to eat. Meanwhile, the high prices of art materials challenged me to search for alternative materials. I like playing with textures and tactile materials, converting them into symbolic elements of indigenous and folk culture, as well as rich social and historical connotations. I gathered materials readily available from home, like the sawali, which are plated and woven bamboo panels, because I had a bahay kubo at home then, where my children played and where we rested. Some panels were starting to degrade and needed to be replaced, so I gathered some of the walls and windows. Because it was difficult to buy impastos that would last, I recycled whatever was on hand. I found and collected some jute sacks, and then some old crochet tablecloths and curtains which were made by my mother, aunt, or mother-in-law. The kind of plates we use are the enamel plates which I then molded. My husband was working with a wood company at the time and I got hold of this plaster bond material. I used the highly concentrated acrylic-based glue to permanently put things together and as a good way to preserve the materials. My inspiration is whatever you see on the streets, in the home, and popular culture. I imitated the plastic tablecloth which you commonly see in carinderias. In our subconscious, apples, grapes, and oranges, which are not native to us, yet they have always been present in our culture. It expresses and molds the mentality of people who eat on that table covered with that design. The girl there is just a typical face of a girl in the street, and she's hungry. There's a bit of a magazine collage there, and I got them from current magazines of that period, expressing the polarization in politics and seething dissatisfaction of farmers stealing their land, and yet they don't own the land. And there is the katsa cloth which I crumpled and then soaked deeply in the plaster bond glue, which is inspired by heavy clouds. So, it's heavy clouds and steaming heat. There's some suggestion of a volcano at the back that shows the seething social volcano we had at that time. I think both materials and content should be tied together. They are expressive and they are inseparable. Material and content. When I work, I start with the flow of the subconscious. It's all from emotions, from what I see around me. And then, when I have painted or pasted, I step back to self-criticize what I'm doing. My mother's and grandmother's traditional role as wife and mother, and my own lived experiences, such as caring for family, led me to much self-introspection. Even then, I keenly observed our country's social circumstances like militarization, struggle for land, and colonial mentality. That's also the conscious part of creation, so it's free-flowing here and there. Self, subconscious, and consciousness. It's very sad that this work is still relevant after so many years since 1987 until today. But we have to continue stating our opinion about the sad reality that we are challenged with and continuing to face today. I'm hopeful that when seeing the work, we continue to be made aware of these problems. And art cannot solve the problem, but if we touch the viewer's minds and hearts and emotion to do the action, then that is good. Thank you for joining me in this episode of Cultural Cash Online.